We are more politically polarized than we have ever been. And this divide between left and right, or red and blue, impacts far more than just the ballot box. From what we wear to the cars that we drive, brands are playing on our allegiances and our identities to transform our political beliefs into dollar bills. A huge thank you to Ground News for sponsoring today's video. It is not hard to guess where someone might fall on the political spectrum just based on the clothes that they wear. I don't know if what I'm wearing indicates anything in particular, but you can tell me down in the comments section. Hopefully something nice, like Levi's red shirt brings out his eyes. We all just kind of intuitively understand that the guy who is driving a lifted Ford Super Duty truck wearing cowboy boots is politically different than somebody who's wearing a Patagonia cardigan, you know, eating some trail mix or something. And this is just basic social signaling, right? We present ourselves in a certain way to fit in with a particular group. This is also known as tribalism, and it's a really foundational part of our human evolution. The idea is that you show certain colors or items to tell others whether or not you are a friend or a foe. And in today's hyper-social online world fueled by clickbait extremes, it has become more and more significant. That's because today a person's political ideology is more than just a collection of political ideas or beliefs. Rather, it reflects deeply ingrained personality traits, psychological values, and it is an integral part of an individual's identity. More than ever, people want to buy things and support companies that align with their political ideology, and as a result, brands are responding. Research in marketing has shown that political ideology can have a significant impact on people's decisions and choices, and a lot of consumers believe that a company should take a stand on social and political issues in this day and age. But I want to take a moment first to mention just how novel of an idea this really is. Like back in the day, who you voted for and what end of the spectrum that you were on didn't really matter as much. Now that's in part because the extremes weren't quite as loud as they are today and we didn't have to listen to them as much, but also because culturally it seems important or even necessary now to indicate where you land on the political spectrum through your purchasing decisions. You can see this in how corporations seemingly advocate for social values and respond to political events. In 2020, for example, after the murder of George Floyd, when the public conversation around Black Lives Matter blew up, more than 950 brands participated in #BlackoutTuesday, where they posted a black square on Instagram to show their support for the movement. Now, as you may know, this didn't go exactly as they planned. Huge companies like Sephora, Nordstrom, Mercedes-Benz, Spotify all made Blackout Tuesday posts, and then they were quickly all bashed publicly for this sort of performative activism. The same thing had happened with the #MeToo movement. Similarly, brands rallied and displayed their support for it. Most notably, perhaps, was Gillette. They released a short film called The Best a Man Can Be and posted it on YouTube, and within 48 hours, that video had 4 million views. It seems like today, successful brands know that if they're going to appeal to customers, they need to make some sort of indication on where they stand. And it's not just marketing campaigns. Most news outlets are owned by conglomerates and have some sort of political lean to them. They can significantly influence our opinions, so we try to find as much media as possible from both sides of the spectrum. And the easiest way to do that is through Ground News. They're an app and a website that we've partnered with for a long time now that allow us to keep up with our favorite topics through diverse perspectives. The cool thing about Ground News is that they provide more context than mainstream media, right? Let's take this article specifically. We can see that this story has over 50 sources covering it, mostly from left-leaning publications. So if you read from mostly right-leaning stuff, you probably missed this.
You can see who each of these are backed by or what their level of factuality is, which really helps when trying to assess the level of bias on a given story. Another awesome feature is the My News Bias feature. It gives me a detailed look at the news that I'm reading, showing which sources I check out the most, their bias, who owns them, and which geographic region the stories are related to. This gives you a moment to reflect on your own habits, right? And you get to decide if you want to explore different perspectives from other parts of the world or across the political spectrum. I encourage you to dive right in by going to ground.news/FP, or you can scan this QR code to get started. You can join for less than $1 a month or use the link in our description to get 50% off their unlimited access Vantage plan, which is what we use here on this channel. Once again, thank you to Ground News for the continued support of Future Proof. All right, so we want to say right off the top here that while we are using a lot of American references, mostly because our audience is mostly American, the same thing pretty well applies across the world. Even in culturally distinct countries like Italy, they run into a similar problem. They're not fighting over Priuses versus pickup trucks, but they've managed to turn a dietary choice into a political issue, with vegan food being a polarizing issue for people on the left and the right in that country. Now, to be clear, most of these brands or products are not overtly endorsing a political party or political figure, but rather they present themselves in such a way to appeal to people who might lean one way or another. The Ford F-150 is an incredible example of this. It's marketed as a tough, reliable work vehicle, right? And the commercial for their 2024 model is incredible. It features guys in cowboy hats chopping down wood, welding together a meat smoker, and serving barbecue in a small town. All imagery that happens to appeal to conservative buyers mostly. Whereas a vehicle like the Toyota Prius is marketed very differently. In the ad for the latest Prius, we are featuring a millennial couple taking a day drive out of a big city to go on a little hike. I just love how different and how blatant that contrast is. Neither of these commercials actually spend any time selling you on the features of the car itself, because it is more important to sell you the identity that you associate it with. Brands like Wrangler and Budweiser have typically run campaigns that celebrate American pride. Not that pride though, the American sort of pride. They highlight themes like American workers or traditional values, really leaning into the patriotism of America. And this is sort of an homage back to the more simpler days of advertising, where brands were apolitical. In both of those ads, they make suggestions to where they are on the spectrum, but they don't outright say it. Because being seen staunchly political left or right does mean that you're alienating somebody from the other side. But things have changed. People today are oftentimes separated into these two tribes, one urban, multicultural and progressive, and the other rural, white, and probably conservative. As we see brands leaning into these more emotional connections, we see them also opening themselves up to a new level of public scrutiny. Chick-fil-A, for example, is closed on Sundays for religious reasons, and they support conservative causes openly. This makes sense to customers that are based in the Bible Belt region of the US, where the chain was founded. But these policies have come into conflict with new potential customer bases in more liberal urban areas. On the other hand, Nike's stock soared after its Colin Kaepernick television spot aired. Of course, you might remember this was a television spot with the slogan, "Believe in something even if it means sacrificing everything." Now, even though videos were uploaded to social media of people burning their Nike products in protest, the company's stock rose by 5%. And Nike was one of the first really big brands to lean into this political positioning in a serious way. This ad actually worked for Nike because it was connected to a core customer base that they knew existed in urban areas. But it doesn't always go this way. Bud Light made a promotional video with Dylan Mulvaney, sparking a massive backlash from politicians and celebrities, signaling this brand deal as the downfall of Western culture. Kid Rock shot a bunch of beer cases with a rifle, Texas Senator Ted Cruz tried to open an investigation about it, and boycotts of the drink caused Anheuser-Busch's revenue to fall 10% year over year, largely due to a drop in Bud Light sales. And the funny thing is, the vice president of marketing for Bud Light openly admitted that the initial push for inclusivity in Bud Light's marketing was motivated because young people are buying less beer.
So much of the identity around these beer brands was focused on trucks and football games and frat parties and country living. And when Anheuser-Busch tried to market to a new demographic, the customer felt a legitimate sense of betrayal. What you may hear described as identity politics actually has very little to do with the traditional political issues of taxes and healthcare and foreign policy or whatever, but much more to do with how large brands and culture pushers market to different demographics of people. But today we see brands and politicians overtly endorsing one another in a whole new way, and no one stands out quite like the pillow guy, Mike Lindell. Mike Lindell has been using his MyPillow fortune and advertising dollars to propel the narrative that the 2020 election was stolen from Trump. The CEO of Goya Foods has said similar things. He's praised Trump, which promoted Ivanka and Trump himself to pose infamously with some cans of Goya beans. And now, even more than ever, with Trump as perhaps the symbol of this, politicians are selling their own products to their fans too. Now, political merch is obviously not a new phenomenon at all, but it definitely reached a whole new height in 2016 with the introduction of the Make America Great Again hat. And honestly, I can't think of another political icon more recognizable as the MAGA hat. But this hat was just the beginning. There has been an entire industry launched of fan merch flourishing around Trump's 2016 election. You've got coffee mugs and bumper stickers and t-shirts and posters and baseball caps and banners, of course. And the people selling this merch will use any memeable moment or even near tragedy to sell more products to his supporters. Not even 48 hours after Trump narrowly escaped an assassination attempt in Pennsylvania, vendors of Trump memorabilia had already started selling products featuring images of the attempt. And it's not just with Trump anymore. Now everybody's got to do it. With the introduction of Kamala Harris as the new presidential candidate for the Democratic Party, they are upping their merch game too. Their $40 Harris Walls camouflage baseball hat sold out in 30 minutes after it was launched. This hat is supposed to be modeled after Walls' own hat, as he is a Midwestern gun owner, but it really took off because it appeals to both typical Republican aesthetics and the left-leaning Gen Z crowd. And this is all because of Chappell Roan. Chappell Roan is a Midwest princess herself, and she released a remarkably similar hat, the same camo thing with the same orange font, as merch just months before Harris Walls was even a reality. It's significant because she is a breakout star of the summer and a LGBTQ+ icon who has a massive appeal with left-leaning voters. The Democrats are leaning into pop culture in a way that political campaigns haven't in the past. They've embraced Brat Girl Summer, which is, of course, from British pop star Charli XCX. She tweeted, "Kamala is brat," shortly after Joe Biden announced that he was stepping out of the race. And by Monday morning, Harris had overhauled her campaign's online presence with a new lime green photo in the style of the Brat album cover. TikTok and Twitter, or X or whatever you call it, was also flooded with Kamala is brat videos and memes. And her team is very deliberate with this. Taylor Swift also endorsed Kamala, and her campaign immediately started selling friendship bracelets, which, if you've been living under a rock, is kind of like a Taylor Swift thing now, apparently. I'm the guy living under the rock, if you were wondering.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
A 2-pack of bracelets that spelled out Harris Walls 24 were released in tandem with Swift's endorsement of Harris, and they sold out within hours and raised over $1 million in pre-orders. Whew. Maybe I should get into politics. It may have become more apparent in recent years, but there has always been an overlap between marketing and politics, as they've been intertwined for decades, of course. And this is because marketing and politics function in the same fundamental ways. They both analyze people based on audience demographics, and they need to understand what they value and what their beliefs are and what their motivations might be in order to tailor their messages to those people specifically. Both brand marketing and political messaging leans on these emotional appeals, whether it's fear or hope or pride or urgency. Tapping into emotions helps create a stronger connection. Think about the Make America Great Again or We're Not Going Back political ads. These are commercials for products, but they just happen to be aimed at voters. And there's a ton of emotions tied up in politics and identity, and it's not surprising that companies are going to latch on to that in order to make money. And the problem is, as algorithms get even better at delivering those very specific messages to those specific audiences, people are just going to get further and further entrenched into their little echo chambers. It is a genuinely worrying time when our politics are so divided, and rather than trying to meet in the middle, we just see more and more brands and companies and politicians fighting for the people on the edges. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and we will see you next week for another episode.